And now I want to welcome our next guest, namely Richard Heart. Give a warm applause for Richard Heart. Welcome, Richard, on the stage. Welcome. We need chairs.
We can stand if you want. It's fine with me. Hello, everyone. Welcome to beautiful Stockholm. It was absolutely wonderful yesterday. Windy and dark now.
Mic working? 1, 2, 3. So currently we will have a discussion with Richard Heart. Welcome, Richard. You are, of course, very known in the space. Many people know you. Let's see, why do I have a flashlight? This is very strange. Let me turn this off. Okay, no flashlight. You are, of course, very known in the space.
Yeah?
Yeah, you'll just
Teasing
shake
here.
hands once again. You're very known in the space. You have a huge Twitter following. You obviously invest a lot in cryptocurrencies.
Yeah.
You have been active in the space a lot.
Yep.
So I think for people who are here who are not really familiar with Bitcoin,
Okay.
I want to ask you the first question, namely, what is money and how is Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, really bringing the awareness and understanding of what is money to the world?
So a lot of people think that we used to have to find a weird thing to trade with someone else just by barter, right? So way back when, if you wanted a cow, the guy only accepted chickens, you'd have to go find a chicken to trade with the guy. That's not true. Never actually happened. It turns out that the first form of money was reciprocity, which means that when you do a thing, you expect someone to act in kind back to you. And that thing that evolved among many creatures, not just humans, where you remember whether you've been treated well and respond in kind, or you remember whether you've been treated poorly and respond in kind, that's actually what money is. So if you think about a family, families in general don't have like a currency, but they still work, they still operate, tasks get divided amongst people, and people kind of understand what fair is. You know, mom and dad go out and make the money, kids do the chores, seems fair and balanced. So that evolved. Once societies got too large to remember an individual's relationship to the other members, they had to start writing it down. So the first thing they did is they had people that had good minds and good memories kind of account for who owed who what, right? And these would become tribal leaders. And then they turned into cities, and then they turned into states, and then they turned into nation states and unions, and you know, if you believe in conspiracies, maybe we end up with a one world government at some point. So all of these collectivist groups have outperformed the ones that didn't collect. And so Bitcoin is basically the top of that food chain now. So originally we had memory and reciprocity, then we had marks on sticks, we had marks on papyrus, we had marks in clay, we had Excel spreadsheets, we had government issued currencies. And so, you know, a lot of people say, I'm not in it for the money, I'm in it for the technology. It's a little bit silly, right? In order to have a good proxy for human energy and effort and time, the only thing we all have the same. We all have the same time, we all have the exact same hours in the day, we all have different opportunities. If you want to account for that stuff, you need another scarce thing to represent it. That's the problem with fiat currencies. If a government wants to come and blow up another country, they don't have to ask you for permission. They don't have to ask you for your money. They don't need your money. They can just print it over there. And so if you worked real hard and you saved for years and years and years, you find out that your bank account's been robbed, but not in the way that you think. You still have the number of dollars that you thought you did, but they don't buy as much anymore. So they continually steal your money without telling you about it by making it worth less by printing on the other side. Bitcoin can solve that, right? And in order for it to solve that, it has to have a huge value. In order for it to have a huge value, a lot of people have to buy a lot of it, and the price has to go up. So when people say, oh, you know, speculation's not that great, it is that great. This stuff only works if it has huge economic mass. And in currencies, it's a competition of which currency has the most liquidity. And the one that you can buy and sell and trade in and not move the market against you is the one that outcompetes all the other ones, right? In the end, money is just language. So if you want to, in the United States, we had a law from the Supreme Court, the Citizens United case, which stated that you couldn't really restrict how a company spent their money to influence an election because it was considered free speech, political speech. And if you can't spend your money, you can't influence politics, you can't execute your will. And by that same token, you know, a lot of this AML, KYC, fake law enforcement that doesn't stop crime, it tries to bother people that have already successfully committed crime and then make it harder for them to hide their money, I guess. You know, that makes it harder for normal people who didn't commit crime, the vast majority of everyone here, to do normal day-to-day things. You know, it shouldn't be nearly impossible to open a bank account, especially if you're an American. And it shouldn't be nearly impossible to, you know, you get on the airplane, they don't accept cash. They just accept cards. Half the people in this country don't accept American Express for whatever reason. It's stupid, right? I should be able to spend my money how I want without all these extra, oh, please, can I spend my money, please? You know, it's stupid. Blockchain can solve a lot of those things, and it can only solve them with a giant economic mass. So if you're just buying and hoping to get rich, that's enough. That's okay. You don't have to be a developer too.
By the way, guys, if you have questions to Richard, go to Twitter and tweet your question, and use hashtag Bloxpo. Then we have our question guys over there from Toshi Times who will read your questions and ask your questions. So the topic of money is key here, that now people are really starting to ask questions. And for me, the topic of money has been central since I was a young kid. Because my grandmother, for example, she had a bunch of euros under her pillow and a bunch of dollars. And we lived in Belarus, so I asked her and my parents, why do you have dollars? Why not use Belarusian ruble? You can buy things, you can use it. But then you get, my parents explained to me that it doesn't really mean a lot, and therefore we need to use other currencies just in case something happens. And what do you think is the difference between different countries? For example, you from the US, do you have issue explaining Bitcoin to people? Because I think the Swedish audience is also such that many people are just asking, why do you need cryptocurrencies? Money is already digital. I have my bank account, I can transfer. So if we can really dive deep into it, what is the real value add for people in the Western world, in US and developed countries?
Sure, that's an easy one. If you have money in a bank account, what you have is an IOU. And sometimes you don't get your money back. So in the United States, there's the FDIC insurance, which covers you, I think, up to $200,000 per account. So I guess you can shard your money across multiple accounts to try and get insurance on each one. But if you've got a fair amount of money, you know, a bank can go out of business and you're not getting paid. You know, if you look in Cyprus, those banks went out of business and they just took a haircut. They just took everyone's balances and, you know, divided it by 10, and I think they gave them about 10% of what their balance used to be. Well, it doesn't have to be like that. You know, if you can hide your naked pictures of yourself, you can store your own money. If your nudes aren't flying around on the internet, oops, well, your private keys might not be either, right? And then you've got an actual bare asset that you control, and you don't have to beg the bank to let you access it at hours that they like, with counterparties they like. I dare you to send a wire transfer to a weird country sometime. They'll just say no. You know, if you want to send someone a Western Union, I know somebody that just sent a Western Union from Texas, and they were interrogated about how well they knew the person and to make sure it wasn't a scam and when's the last time you talked to them. If you actually try to send some money to somebody by Western Union, you're going to get interrogated. If you try and send a wire from the bank, you're going to get interrogated. And it's really a question of how much you want to get interrogated about something that's supposed to be yours. And so that IOU, that fantasy that some number in an account is really yours, it doesn't need to be that way. You know, you can really have your money like your naked pictures. Send them to who you want, when you want, and no one else, you know?
I think many people are also wondering the following question, that, you know, these interrogations, that you call them, aren't they in place for a good reason? To prevent money laundering, terrorist financing.
Yeah, so you don't have to put your whole stack in one thing. You can have a little bit of everything. You can have some money on the debit card, some money on the credit card, some money in you know, a crypto that is programmable like Ethereum, or a crypto that's less changeable but therefore more secure like Bitcoin. You can have a little bit of all these things. You know, it would be I think it would be unwise to not have a good portion of your funds in crypto. There are a lot of billionaires who've done very well, have figured out that this has legs to it. I mean, if you think, what's the market for currency? Multiple trillions? And what, you know, how many technologies out there can really change the relationship of man to government and man to other men by, you know, making freedom of speech and commerce easier? There's not that many things you could buy into. I mean, it's mostly Rate My Sandwich app and a bunch of social crap, people running around pretending that what they're doing is useful, but it's really not. So this project, you could get a 10x, 100x on a lot of different tokens that you're not going to get in other things you may be able to invest in. So,
another important thing that I need to tell you guys is that this agenda is non-stop. So if you want to go to the bathroom, you want to go to other stages. For example, on stage 2, we will have blockchain 101. So if you really want to learn about blockchain on a deeper level and really want to learn what we're talking about, go to that stage. And so just so you know, we will not tell you now you can go. Choose yourself when you want to go, when you want to come back, and then we will have a lunch break. So Richard, something that I discussed during my talk is that cryptocurrencies are trustless, that you and I don't need to trust each other. We trust blockchain, we trust this system of computers, making sure that, for example, I cannot lie about how many Bitcoin I have. But this is how you explain cryptocurrencies to people who are learning about it. But of course, this question is more nuanced than that, and I know that you have opinions on the trustlessness of cryptocurrencies.
Yeah.
So what is your opinion on that topic?
So, because there's no such thing as trustless, there's trust reduced, right? When you enter your password to your wallet, if you're not the only person that has that, you're screwed, right? So what other people might have your secret password? Somebody with a video camera pointed at your computer. Somebody with a cell phone sitting on the desk next to your keyboard, monitoring the accelerometer to see the vibrations, to guess which keys you pressed. Somebody that records the audio and has a good sample of your key presses from other audio. Somebody that has, for instance, a flashlight app that you installed, you may have given it more permissions than you thought. Now perhaps it can read all of your content on your websites. Or you downloaded a fake wallet. You know, you Googled Electrum wallet, and you didn't go to electrum.org. You went to the newly fraudulently registered electrum.com to go download their wallet stealing app, right? If you must actually trust a lot of things to use a cryptocurrency safely. So hardware wallet removes a lot of that. That's nice. And not installing every exe that you see on the internet is also pretty useful, right? The less things that you install on your computer, the less things that can screw you over, basically. So if you do like play with crypto in $1 million amounts, you really should have a machine that just does that and doesn't do anything else, you know? Or you are playing with fire. So there's trust. You have to trust that you're on the right website. You have to wait for a certain number of confirmations or your transaction might get rolled back. You know, it's trust reduced, it's not trust less, and that's fine. It's still better.
Before we get into the next question, I have a question for you guys once again. How many of you know how many cryptocurrencies there are on the market? How many of you think it's over 100? Raise up your hand. How many of you think it's over 500? Over 1,000? Over 1,500? Yeah, it's over that. So, Richard, is it good or bad for Bitcoin? Because many Bitcoin maximalists, people who believe strongly in Bitcoin and do not believe in other cryptocurrencies, argue that all of them are useless. And I know you yourself, before you were also a Bitcoin maximalist, now you've kind of changed your mind.
Yep.
So what is your view on Bitcoin versus all the other thousands of cryptocurrencies that we see now and we will only see more and more going forward?
So I used to, you know, I mined Bitcoin in early 2011, and I held and held and held and held and held and held, and I'm still holding. And, you know, I saw Ethereum come out of nowhere and start to almost overtake the market cap. I thought, well, that's not good. I don't own any Ethereum. I'm going to have to say some crappy things about this project. So, you know, I started amplifying the problems that they had, which were security problems mostly. When you can write any code you can dream, you can create any bug you can dream. So it gives developers a lot of rope to hang themselves with, right? But over time, those bugs kind of get worked out, and it's a more secure system now. When you could go to an exchange and only buy Ethereum for Bitcoin, Bitcoin went up in value as Ethereum went up in value because you had to buy the one to get the other. And then there was a float, you know, people didn't just instantly get out of the other one, and that float grew. And that's still the case with a lot of altcoins today. If you want to buy an altcoin, for the most part, you need to have another crypto to do it. Only a few coins have fiat pairs, like US dollar to Bitcoin, US dollar to Ethereum. The more of those that exist, the worse it is for Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin is the central reserve currency of all the cryptos, then other cryptos doing well raises Bitcoin's value. There's a reason that you saw the all-time high USD value for all cryptos go to its height, maximum height, at the exact same time. When more fiat pairs get added, like Coinbase is doing, I don't particularly like Coinbase, it hurts Bitcoin because you don't need to buy it anymore. If you want Ethereum, you can just give them your cash and they're going to give you Ethereum. If you want the crap coin of the day that they list, you know, let's say Bitcoin Cash, you know, you could buy that directly for cash on a surprise listing against the roadmap. Why have a roadmap if you're going to break it? And by the way, crap like that's the reason there's security laws, right? So Brian Armstrong, if you're watching, Brian, I don't like the things you do. You know, he says that he holds more Ethereum than Bitcoin, and Ethereum's where all the developers are. But I believe the majority of his company's profit is from Bitcoin. And, you know, is the CEO of a company, you kind of owe it to your shareholders and investors and maybe the other people on the board to not demonize your core product, you know, the secure one with less $1 million hacks all the time. I can't crap talk Ethereum too much now because I'm launching a coin on it too, so I have to switch my find nice things to say.
That is very important for Swedish people, and that Sweden as a society works a lot about, with is the environment and being environmentally friendly and doing recycling. And of course, when you hear about Bitcoin and you hear about mining and all of these computers mining Bitcoin, many Swedes in particular, but also of course in other countries, get very scared. And this may be the #1 question I get about Bitcoin. What about mining? What about environment? What is your take on this issue?
This one's an interesting one. So you only need mining for security. And you only need security if people are attacking. If no one ever attacks, it's just a big cost. So if no one ever tries to break into your house, door locks are a huge waste of time and money. But some people will say that if you don't have door locks, you'll invite it and you'll create more criminals. So you have to keep honest people honest. I believe that cryptocurrencies are oversecured from the mining perspective because there's so few attacks. Like, I'll give you an example. When Bitcoin Cash forked the Bitcoin code and had less hash rate, oh, well, they should get screwed up because, you know, now they have less hash rate. Less hash rate is worse, right? They didn't get screwed up, it was fine. There's a lot of low hash rate coins out there that don't have problems. So, you know, I believe alternate proofs of whatever, proof of space-time, proof of stake, I think that they could be viable reduced security models just because there's so few attacks. If attacks start to ramp up, then, you know, burn the electricity of nations is acceptable, I guess. But it's not great. I mean, Vitalik recently said, you know, proof of stake has burned more human resources than all of the hacks and mistakes combined. I'm like, yep, that's true, yeah. A lot of energy has been, you know, thrown away. An interesting fact on why mining actually works. So animals figured this out a long time ago. If you want to know whether an animal is being truthful about what it can do or not, you measure the signal that it gives that has a cost. So if your bird, really flashy feathers and dancy jumping around movements, those are calorically expensive and provide you no other benefit whatsoever. So the ability to waste is the only way you can trust the signal. And, you know, people wear fancy clothes, people squirt champagne in nightclubs, and miners burn electricity. And so you can trust that they're telling the truth. You can't just vote on everything yes, right? If it didn't cost you to vote, if you got more than one vote, you just vote for every candidate. And then you could feel great whichever one won. You could say, I voted for that guy. So the game theory behind why mining works and proof of work works and keeps people honest is because it's costly. And so anytime someone says, oh, well, we made mining more efficient. No, you didn't. You just made everyone else adopt the same efficiency thing to re-screw each other to compete for the same pool again. Anyway, I thought it was neat that the animal kingdom came up with proof of work before we did. And it's why they have fancy feathers to prove truth.
So an interesting topic that we discussed yesterday at the VIP dinner was that just a year ago, Bitcoin Cash wasn't around.
Yep.
And just a year ago, we had New York agreement. And Bitcoin Cash is a fork of Bitcoin. And forks is something that I think is natural when you have an open source project. Anyone can take the code, anyone can take the blockchain because it's also decentralized, transparent, and just create a copy of Bitcoin and call it something else. We've seen Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin Diamond, so many Bitcoins. What is your take on forks, and are you going to fork Bitcoin?
I'm forking
I've heard
Bitcoin.
Rumors.
Yes, I'm doing it. It's really easy. I think it's like the minimum viable cool thing I can do, basically. So, like originally I was going to do distributed computing, and it's hard. right? And then I'm like, all right, well, I'll just fork off some other people's code. And they left some parts out. So I'm like, God dang, this is harder than I'd hoped. And since I'm the guy building it, I can't like just hand it off to someone else. That's what sucks about being advanced in a space. You kind of have to do everything yourself. There's no one you can just ask, like, hey, can you figure this out? So what I'm doing is I'm taking, we'll talk about forks. Originally, Bitcoin Cash forked Bitcoin and wanted to become the real Bitcoin, but it didn't work out for them. And they were rather antagonistic and, not nice to the original Bitcoin people, which is funny because those people wrote the code that they're using to get rich. So you kind of should pay honor and homage to the people you're getting rich with or on. But then now they have a utility separate from their original, we're going to be the real Bitcoin. They have liquidity, and their software is good. It was a fork of the best software in the world. So I have less of a problem with the Bcash project, which is a better brand name than Bitcoin Cash, by the way. And I don't say it out of like anger. I just say it's the same reason everyone did. It's easier, better brand. Bcash to me sounds better than Bitcoin Cash with 3 syllables. So their fork provides utility. If the Bitcoin network was full, or you needed to transact with less fees, it can do that, and that is useful. So if it's true that money is speech, and if it's true that you can speak on that network at lower fees, I think it has a use. So I'm kind of doing the same thing on Ethereum. I'm taking the Bitcoin UTXO set, I'm squishing it for gas efficiency, and I'm putting it on the Ethereum blockchain, and then people can claim it. So if you have a Bitcoin, you can get one of these Bitcoin hex, Bitcoin hex, hex.com. And in order for it to be adopted, I'm just throwing some incentives in there. So if you do it earlier, you get 10% more. It falls off every week. If you don't claim, those coins kind of get given to other people. So there's like a first mover advantage thing. And then in the end, you'll have like a way to communicate your Bitcoin value on another network that was basically free to you. Like your cost was that you paid a gas fee. I think that's cool. I think that being able to take your economic speech and do it across other networks at almost no cost to you. I mean, Roger Ver, he gave everybody 10 or 15% free money with his fork. So even if what he did was a little bit shady or how he did it wrong, a lot of people made a lot of money on what he did. And I would much rather have people fork Bitcoin to make me rich than launch ICOs that I get nothing on. So an ICO comes out, it does a new project. As a Bitcoin holder, I don't get anything. But if someone does a fork and it has cool new stuff in it, okay, I make some money on that. I like that better.
An interesting debate that is also going on with Bitcoin is whether Bitcoin is more of a store of value versus a currency used for daily transactions. Obviously, currently, Bitcoin cannot be used for daily transactions because of the scaling issue. And my personal view is that this topic is more nuanced than just black and white. That either store of value or currency, it is just two separate. My view is that you can have both. What is your take on that?
Well, not everyone has an enterprise class Cisco router with, 128 switch ports in it at their house because we have big hardware for big central things, and then we get smaller and smaller and smaller, right? Like, you may have a sewing kit at home, but you may not have like a sweatshop, right? The same thing works on Bitcoin. You need the maximum security for the largest transactions, but you can federate that trust out lower and lower, right? So it's just like waiting for confirmations. You could accept 0 confirmation Bitcoin transaction, and it would work fine if no one ever double spent you, or you never had, a block reorg. So, and then as you need more security and the transactions are larger, you just wait more confirmations because it means that the chance of the history being changed underneath you is less and less to the point of nearly impossible. So you can do that same federated kind of scaling model of trust where you do the network that has the most hash rate, the most waste, is the hardest to change, stores the most value, and then you use slightly less trusted layers on top of that, like Lightning or, that's what an exchange is. When you use an exchange, that's just a tier 2 layer on top of your cryptocurrency that you hope and trust does what you ask them to do, right? And you get your money out before the hackers do, right? So basically, multiple tiers solves the scaling issue, and it's the only thing that solves the scaling issue. It's not reasonable for the entire universe to store on every storage device a copy of you buying your coffee. That's stupid and wasteful and unnecessary.
So except that we will have a Richard Heart Bitcoin next year, what is your predictions on the whole space? If we stand here a year from now, how many coins will we see on coin market cap? Do you think it will at 5x, 10x? Where is Bitcoin? Where is Bitcoin Cash? Just an overview of the whole industry.
You want to hear about price or technology? Or both?
Both.
All right.
Give us the most interesting aspects.
I liked Bitcoin a lot more when it was $24,000 in the futures, 26,000, depending on what exchange you were looking at. That to me was a much more fun Bitcoin. I liked the Bitcoin bull market where it only dropped 40%, so you could long every 40% dip, long as hell on margin, and just multiply your wealth by a bunch. I liked that. When Bitcoin decided to go from 20K down to 58, 55, I started to like it a lot less because, you know, it's not fun taking a 70% haircut. And then if the difference between you and a genuine crap coin is, you know, you dropped 70 and they dropped 80, that's not that great, you know? I would prefer my quality tier 1 blue chip crypto to not drop 70%. I wish the CME didn't dump on us. Can you imagine shorting the CME on the day the contract came out? You're like, yep, all I do is just short, and that was the top, and my counterparty is the best counterparty in the world. I'm definitely getting paid. What a easy job those guys had, dude. I mean, like, you would think that there would be no free money. Well, those guys did pretty good. They ran it up, they marked it up, and then they distributed it. And if you look at the volume of how many people got out at the top, not that many. There wasn't that much volume up there, so not that many people actually got to sell the top. And it makes me wonder, you know, did we find this year's bottom already? We're still under the 200 daily moving average at about 10K, which we bounced off of 3 times in this direction. We couldn't hold the 50 moving average, which I think was 84, 83.50. So you know, this is how you define a bear market. Are you under the 200 daily? And when we can get back over it and, you know, bounce off it where support becomes resistance, I'd be a little bit more excited about the bull run of 2018. But hey, if I have my own crap coin, you know, Bitcoin can go up or down less, and it will matter less to me.
What about the technology war between Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash? Do you think both of them will coexist? Because you presented a view on the about the fact that you think it's better to scale with layer 2 solutions. Bitcoin Cash has other approach. So do you think both of them will coexist, or in a year, what is the relationship between Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash?
So I think Bitcoin Cash has a great starting point because they forked the best software in the world. I think some of the people that run in their circle are terrible. Fake Satoshi is a terrible person. If you go on stage and you say, hey, I'm Satoshi and I'm going to prove it, and it turns out you're a lying scumbag, you shouldn't be allowed to speak at conferences. You shouldn't be hanging out with leaders in a space. You should be ostracized and treated as poorly as any fraudster should be treated, right? I'd like to see real Satoshi come out, you know, on a rope and like drop kick a guy. That would be awesome. And then I'd ask him to never sell his coins. Please don't ever sell your coins, Mr. Satoshi. 30, please. So, you know, now if their stack continues to improve and they try new experiments, then there'll be a successful high liquidity altcoin, and I don't have any problem with that at all. You know, it's useful, but just stop the trash talk and take away the fake Satoshi guy and do normal hard work like every other blockchain developer in the space. A lot of people are doing innovation, you know? They just do it with less crap talk, you know? You don't see Ethereum out there crap talking, I don't know, Neo or something, you know? They don't have to. They're busy building their own thing.
We don't have many minutes left, but do we have any questions on Twitter? Question, guys. Let us know. Do we have any? Yes, there are questions, but there's no mic.
I can hear you. I can just repeat it.
Yes, we have a question. People are asking about government regulations and what will happen in the future, how the governments will be able to regulate crypto or not.
So he says that Twitter's asking if what our opinion is of government regulation and how governments will try and regulate crypto. You know, do you want to answer that or do you want me to?
So my view is that there's good and bad way to do it. I think some regulation is good because you bring more innovation into space. It might be contradictory. How can you have regulation in innovation? But with slight regulation, you now see more serious players entering the field. You see huge corporations entering the field in a way they wouldn't be able to do before because it's just a risk to enter something completely unregulated. So I think moderate regulation is good. Too much will just kill the the industry in your country, but the people will just leave and take their money and take their talent somewhere else?
I'm pretty bullish on reasonable regulations in the form that, one of the biggest lobbying entities in the United States is the Motion Picture Association of America, the MPAA. And, they're the guys that had the Secret Service kick in Kim.com's door, arrest him, illegally monitor his communications. And that's in another nation, right? So like America leaned on New Zealand hard enough to get them to act like, this dude was a terrorist, basically. If the MPAA wasn't able to shut down BitTorrent, they're not going to shut down Bitcoin, right? I mean, if you think about how much movies and music and things of value are exchanged over the BitTorrent network every day, billions and billions and billions of dollars, yet the network is about as fast and as good as it's ever been. So if they weren't able to shut down BitTorrent, I don't think they're going to be able to shut down Bitcoin. Now, if we become a multi-trillion-dollar thing, then maybe other nation states would consider it, maybe like if North Korea becomes less friendly again, they could target DDoS certain ports or something. I don't think you're going to have to worry about harsh government regulations, particularly since these guys have bags now. I don't know if you saw Mr. Clayton, the head of the SEC. He has nice things to say about Bitcoin and ICOs. Things like an ICO can go from a security into a non-security over time, which is a rather interesting and awesome statement if you're an ICO person. I think a lot of these guys in power own some crypto and prefer the price to go up than down. You don't get on the Chicago Board of Exchange, CME, largest market in the entire world, unless you've got friends in high places. So I think enough of the powers that be own this stuff that you're mostly just going to see favorable regulation.
Thank you very much for asking the question.
So what about environmental aspects of Bitcoin, given that the mining already consumes more energy than, example, Sweden and the Netherlands?
If you want to secure a lot of value, you must endure a lot of waste. And the systems, Bitcoin doesn't exist in a vacuum. We have existing systems that move billions and billions of dollars, and all of the human beings that work in those systems, those giant buildings, the armies of accountants, the armies of people working on very old code, that all has a very high expense. Moving cash has a high expense. Chargebacks have a high expense. And that's what we're really competing with. So if you measure the economic cost and energy cost of the existing system, it is still slightly worse than Bitcoin. So if this existing system were more efficient, then Bitcoin would suck more. It'd be less competitive. But since everything sucks so much already, it's okay to waste the energy of a small country. And since we have to fix energy anyway with fusion or solar for other reasons, at some point it'll just be fixed. I mean, if you look at the cost of a solar panel, it's not exactly Moore's law. There's another law that describes how quickly solar panels are becoming more affordable. I think solar may end up fixing the problems of Bitcoin energy costs, or if Vitalik's proof of stake thing works out with, Casper and all that nice stuff, that would work too.
Thank you so much for answering questions. Thank you, Tosha Times, for raising questions. And I want to thank Richard for explaining this field to us more, answering my questions. And it was my pleasure. Thank you for everyone watching. On the other stage, we have currently how to build the dApp. So if you are technical, you want to learn more about how you can build these smart contracts on the blockchain, go check that out. And next, we will have a pitch competition here on stage. But first, an applause for Richard. Thank you so much, Richard.
Get rich, everybody. May you all make mad gains.
And also we have Trezor as our sponsor. So each speaker gets a Trezor wallet, hardware wallet. Check that up. Just Google Trezor wallet if you want to store your cryptocurrency. Richard, here's your Trezor. Now we can keep all Bitcoin in a very safe manner. And yes, thank you so much.
Thanks, man.
Be in touch.
See ya.